Well, welcome to the Metal Institute of Thrashology. This is Sofia from Exiled Hope, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
It's so great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, had a few little hang-ups before this, so thank you for guiding me through it all.
Yeah, no problem.
So I checked out your new album, Apocrypha. I'm not real good at I went to public school, so I'm not good with reading, but it's a kick-ass album, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't know how to classify it though. I didn't know if it was like Blackened Doom or progressive metal or
I would say, I call it Blackened Power Metal, but
okay.
it does have a lot of progressive elements because there are so many like genres being meshed together, and that tends to be more of a progressive thing. So I guess you could kind of lump it in with progressive metal if you wanted to, but I personally call it like Blackened Power Metal because there's a significant power metal influence, significant black metal influence, also a lot of doom in there. So I don't know, maybe it might end up becoming like Blackened Doom Power. So we'll
I
see where
never
it goes.
I never know what to classify an album, and especially like nowadays because it seems like there's so many influences like mixed in. So I hope I didn't offend you. Some guys
No,
are
not at
really
all.
upset. But my favorite track off of the album was the Death Slayer. I really
Yeah,
liked
that's a
that one.
cool one. That's very progressive, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I was so stoked over the whole album. Like you mixed in like elements of metalcore, it seemed, and
Yeah.
I was blown away. Now you did everything on this album except for the tracks that had like Metal Matt and
Yeah.
a few featurings. You did all the guitars, the bass, and the drums?
The drums are programmed, so I don't
Okay.
know if that counts, but I did guitar,
Yeah.
bass, vocals, yeah. So
Yeah, I was blown away. I'm pretty
you.
new to the guitar, so I know like what struggles it takes. And to put an album together is just so cohesive was it was really nice listen.
Thank
It's
you.
different than my it's really different than my general thrash and death metal that I go to. So it was nice to have like longer songs, a longer album that I could like sit and really think to, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like that's what makes a great album. Like, all if the songs are all kind of sounding the same, then it's hard to like sit through the album and listen to it and get through it. But if you have a lot of diversity in the style, and if you're kind of pulling from all kinds of different influences, and all the songs kind of build on each other, then I feel like it's always easier for me personally to like sit down and listen to an album like that all the way through because it keeps your interest the whole way, and it kind of builds like an arc of suspense.
It
So cool.
does. And
Yeah.
I was reading over the notes that excuse me, that Curtis sent over, and it said in there that you took a break too from music to study law.
Well, I'm not taking a break. I am doing this while I'm in law school. I actually graduate law school in May. So
Congratulations.
thank you. I'm super excited to be done with this.
I
But
bet.
yeah, so I think the break that Curtis was referring to was I took some time off from working on original music after I released Angel of Greytown in 2021 because I just felt like I plateaued and didn't really know like where to progress from there because I didn't have the skills to make the music that I wanted to make. So I took some time to like take voice lessons and practice on the guitar and like learn more music theory and things like that and just develop my skills and like work on some covers. And then that when I felt competent in those new skills, that's when I put them together and kept working on Apocrypha.
I tell you what, I remember listening to some of your albums or some of your singles when I first started this about a year ago, and it seemed like this was a huge step up from that, even in the production and just the guitar work. Like I really enjoyed the guitar work, and honestly, like I really am glad that you're a female in the metal genre too, because I feel that we don't have enough diversity in metal, and I feel that like having more diversity brings in more like influences and makes for more diversity in music. So I was just blown away that you're doing law school on top of all this. I actually looked at going to law school like a couple years ago, and then I saw the mount. I have a family, but I saw the mountain of work that it takes,
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do this. So kudos to you for sticking it out. And it's not like writing an album, it was like a 10-minute a day type project either. So
Yeah, because the thing about it's funny that you mentioned the workload in law school because in my first semester of law school back in fall 2022, I actually like didn't touch my guitar for like 3 months, and I was so depressed, and it made me feel like, I was not myself when I'm not working on music. And when winter break came around in December, I was like, I am never doing that again. I have got
Yeah.
to do something music related, like at least a couple times a week, to feel connected to myself and feel like I'm, still grounded in my interests and that I have a personality outside of law school. So, yeah, working on this album and working on music has kind of been integral to keeping me sane and grounded during this process.
That's
So, yeah.
great. It's great that you realize too that that music is like your like mental break or your release. It's great that you realize that. Took me years, took me till I was like 41 to figure it out. So, I'm glad that you figured it out. I went back and listened to that. Now I'm not good with names of albums and songs just because I listen to so much music and I just, but I forget the split you did with
Steel Forge, Realm of the Exile. Yeah.
yeah, that thing rocks.
Thank you. It was so much fun. And I'm really glad that you mentioned you like the guitars on Apocrypha, because a lot of my guitar work is actually very thrash influenced. Like I grew
Yeah.
up listening to Megadeth and Metallica, Anthrax, the Big Four. I'm also really into Creator, so a lot of my
Okay.
rhythm guitar work is super, super like thrash oriented. I'm very much a classic rock guitar player when it comes to like my leads and my melodic playing, but thrash is where my art lies when it comes to rhythm. So
That's awesome. I just saw Creator like 2 years ago too. Like
nice.
great band. I love those guys.
That's cool.
I was like, I was really surprised too when I started your album and it started with the like the I think it was a piano or some type of classical like influence. I
Mhm.
listened to a lot of classical and jazz too, surprisingly, because it
That's
complements
cool.
thrash so well. But I was impressed too, like, do you do the piano and all that too?
I do, yeah. And it's funny because I did take piano lessons when I was like 7, but I just couldn't wrap my head around it, couldn't comprehend it, so I like quit. And then like a couple years ago, when I started Exiled Hope, I realized if I want to make symphonic influenced metal, I gotta learn how to play the keyboard. So I
Yeah.
started applying what I knew about guitar to the keyboard, in the sense that I know how to play scales and I know how to play chords on the guitar. I know how those work based on my experience playing the guitar, and so I was able to translate what I knew about that theory wise into the piano. So I started composing with guitar and piano concurrently, and I'm still not the world's greatest piano player, but it works for what I do, I think.
It sounded great on your album, I'll give you that much.
Thanks.
Yeah, my IT department, my 10-year-old, she sings professionally and she takes like a lot of music classes as far as professional singing and
That's
piano.
cool.
So she is actually giving me lessons on piano because I'm thinking that the piano linear wise would help me with my music theory because I don't understand guitar at all.
Yeah, and I have this funny little theory that if you start on guitar or a stringed instrument, it's going to be harder to do piano. But if you start on piano, it's going to be harder to do guitar, because the theory applies universally where whatever instrument you're on, but it's such a different feel, and you use the instruments so differently that sometimes it's hard for my brain to kind of go from, okay, I got to get out of guitar mode and get into piano mode for this.
But that's awesome that you have like two weapons you can use, or I guess with the bass, three weapons. And
Yeah.
it was also nice too. I really like the layered vocal approach. I like the
Fun.
I'll be honest, like as much as my kid sings professionally, it's all clean and it's not my favorite. I'm just, I love her to death, but like I'm not a clean singing guy.
Yeah.
But it was great to see your clean singing and your dirty singing like contrast, and it really was effective in like a dissonant sort of sound, you know?
Yeah, variety is the spice of life. I would get bored if I wrote the same thing over and over again. And I feel like as a person, I have very like contrasting aspects to my personality and to my interests. And so I need that contrast in my music to accurately reflect who I am and to accurately reflect my emotional state and communicate that part of myself to the world.
So if most of your influences come from thrash, like where do you get the piano and the softer influence
Yeah.
from?
So guitar wise, I'm very thrash influenced, but songwriting wise, I'm very power metal influenced and very
Okay.
black. influence. So my songwriting, like I would say when I first started Exiled Hope, I wanted to write like Nightwish and Avantasia and Camelot, so
Okay.
like symphonic power metal bands, and I still pull a huge amount of influence from those bands. So in terms of my overall approach to songwriting, it's very melodic. Melody is king to me. Like if
Yeah.
even the songs where I am primarily doing harsh vocals, there needs to be some sort of singable melody underneath it all, in order to convey, the feelings of the song and to make it interesting to listen to. So
Yeah.
I'm very like pretty much all of my songs start with some kind of hook and then I build around that hook, even if it's going to be like black metal or death metal.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, with the title Apocrypha, that to me, I studied like some religion classes. So Apocrypha means to me like between the Old and New Testament or whatever.
Yeah.
I saw in Curtis's notes too that you had some other this was building upon some previous works. I
Yes.
didn't have time. I'll be honest, I didn't have time to go back and listen to all your stuff. You have a
That's
lot of
fine.
you have a lot of releases. So I apologize there. I usually like to listen to the whole catalog a couple times. I didn't make it there. So if you could you give me a little rundown of the earlier stuff and how you decided to build upon it?
Yeah, so the main theme of Exiled Hope, like story wise, because it's a conceptual sort of series of albums, it's a conceptual project. The main theme of it is like dystopian fantasy. So it takes place in this sort of medieval fantasy, steampunk Victorian inspired world where this young woman named Hope discovers that her city government is planning something nefarious and they don't want the citizens to know about it, so they, she discovers the secret and she tells everyone, and of course they don't like that, so they exile her and she starts a rebellion against them, and it ends tragically. In the first album it ends with her dying. And then Angel of Greytown, the 2021 follow-up, takes place a couple hundred years after her execution, and it follows the journey of this historian who is uncovering the things she left behind, because she kind of became a folk hero, but of course the corrupt government doesn't want everyone to know about her, so her secrets were mostly destroyed and any evidence of her existence was mostly destroyed, and so this historian stumbles upon a small shred of evidence that she actually existed and starts constructing this narrative and kind of trying to figure out who she was and what she did and how the city can reclaim its history and reclaim what it lost culturally, since the city government also outlawed all forms of art, literature, music, outlawed any sort of study of their history. So this historian kind of gathers together his, scholars and academic friends and tries to, rebel against the city in a more subtle way than Hope did, and he kind of gives the city back its vibrance and its knowledge of its past and who they are as a people. And so that's kind of what Angel of Greytown is about. And then Apocrypha takes a slightly different look at the central conflict of the story, because it actually follows one of the members of the city government, and he's kind of caught in the middle of this personal conflict where he doesn't know whether he should continue down the path that's been predestined for him by the people in power, or whether he should forge his own journey and figure out what he lost and what he can, reclaim, and whether he can use his position in society for a good purpose instead of just falling into what everyone expects of him, even if it may not be what he wants to contribute to society.
The only reason I chuckle is it's kind of similar to my story, but maybe I'll send you an email about it later. Have you ever thought about maybe like writing a story
I
or
have. When I was a kid, I really wanted to be an author, and I'm super interested in history. So some of thematically, even though this is dystopian fantasy, a lot of it is inspired by the history of the Russian Revolution in a very like loose sense. The theme of the songs tends to be, here's what happens when you let a government destroy a culture, destroy everyone's art, their history, their religion, and replace it with, idolizing the government as their gods. What happens when you allow that? And so these albums are kind of a fictionalization of, any time that's happened in history, and it's the I guess the message is kind of, you know, how do you keep this from happening again, and why is it important to not let this happen again?
And it seems like it's happening again. Whichever party you
Yeah.
choose now, it seems like, it's
Mhm.
going that way again, sadly. I work for the federal government, so like I completely understand. Also
Yeah.
because George Orwell is one of my favorite authors.
Yeah, a lot of this is inspired by 1984. Yeah, I hope that comes through a little bit.
As soon as you started telling the story, I was like, man, this is
Yeah.
like Orwellian dystopia, like, and I like Animal Farm too. That's another
Yeah.
really good one.
It's
Yeah.
very, very Animal Farm-esque.
I was an English major in college,
That's
and
so cool.
yeah, so like, and then I realized like I can't do any, I can't make a living off of that. So it's always interested me though, and I think your music and your background really aligns with that.
Yeah, I try to let my historical interests and my literature interests come through in my songwriting, kind of like what Iron Maiden did, and
Yeah.
let that come through in a subtle way, in a way that's not like beating you over the head with whatever my beliefs are or whatever, story I'm trying to tell. I try to like leave enough room for people to interpret it the way that they feel works for them, while still carrying the story somehow.
Yeah. I don't know if you've listened to the new Mutagenic Host album. They're like black and death metal,
Oh, that's
maybe
cool.
just regular death metal. But they did a whole album about AI. It just released maybe like a couple days, maybe like a week or two ago. But they did a whole thing about AI and where AI takes on human characteristics and how AI basically eradicates the human race. And I thought it was interesting because they're from London. So I was like, wow, like the history of that's where the Industrial Revolution began. And it sort of like kind of parallels with the Russian Revolution a little bit. So I was like, wow, that's really neat, you know? So I'm gonna have to go back and listen to your album a couple more times, which I planned on it anyway, but
Yeah, I feel like music is, a perfect medium to explore other interests and to bring them into a context that other people can enjoy without it being too obvious. And it's kind of a gentle introduction to those sort of topics.
I also think like, especially like you said earlier, music doesn't beat you over the head with it. Like your
Yeah.
local news or whatever tells
Mhm.
you what they want you to think. Whereas like in your albums, like you said, it allows the listener to like formulate their own opinions on the subject matter.
Yeah, and I try to make the lyrics like personal and make it feel more like a personal story than me just rehashing whatever events happened in the world, because I do want my music to be primarily an escape from the issues of the world, and I don't want to, drag people back into that with my music, but it's there if they want to. If they feel like exploring it and it interests them, and it's part of the story that I'm telling, that's great. And if they want to see that, that's great. But if they don't want to see that and they prefer more personal interpretations of the song, I try to leave space for that too.
Well, I thought it worked out great because until you explained about the Russian Revolution, like I wouldn't have made that
Yeah.
connection, outright. I always think when especially like in power metal, there's so many stories of like battles and like overcoming obstacles that I always think of it a lot of like metaphorically as
Mhm.
like overcoming my own struggles and obstacles. And I don't know if that's just the way I think, but I also feel that sometimes, while the artist may not try to formulate that metaphor, it does allow your own interpretations. I don't know, I kind of lost that tangent, but
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get you. Art is it's a very great way to, take concrete things that happen to you and concrete things that happen in the world around you and personalize them, and then like put it out into something that you can see and interact with on a smaller scale, and kind of poke around with it and see, okay, like what is this doing really, and like how am I interacting with these feelings and with these events, and how is this impacting me personally? And it makes it less scary to deal with it when it's in that smaller condensed medium that you can, choose how you interact with it.
sure. Now, is this album like the end of the story or like the end of the saga, or you're not
Not
sure?
remotely. There's plenty more to come. I did most of album 4 last year and some of this year. So most of album four is recorded and written. It needs some polishing and some touching up, but it's pretty much ready, and the saga is continuing. We're switching back to Hope after she returned from the Underworld from Realm of the Exiled, which I dragged you away from that. I'm sorry. So if you want to
That's
talk
okay.
about Realm of the Exiled, we can too.
No, whatever you want to talk about. This is your time to shine.
Yeah. So yeah, album four is kind of a continuation of Realm of the Exiled. Realm of the Exiled is firmly within the Exiled Hope canon, even though it's a collab. So Realm of the Exiled kind of chronicles Hope's journey through the underworld after her execution, because she knows she has unfinished business left in her city, and she still has her people to save, even hundreds of years after she's dead. And so she enlists the help of the Forger, who's also trapped in the underworld, and the Forger helps her fight these demons that rule the underworld and try to block her way and keep her from coming back. And she eventually prevails with the help of the Forger and overcomes some trust issues along the way. And album four shows her emerging from that state and finding her way back to the city to continue the battle that she started, and to wrestle with her place in the world, since it's changed so much since she was trapped in the underworld for so long. She doesn't really know how the world works anymore, and she's dealing with her identity and her place in this new world.
Wow. I'm curious to see a video. I want to start seeing.
I would love to do videos, and I think it'd be really cool if I did animated videos for this.
I think so, because I think if you hired actors, I mean, you're looking at like a long, long, like 4 hour film.
Yeah, it could be hard. So I think animation would be a really neat medium to try this out in. And when I was a kid, I actually really wanted to be an animator.
It's awesome.
Yeah,
So it could all tie together, like the writing, the animation, and the music, you know?
yeah. Hmm.
I've often thought, especially with Iron Maiden, like you mentioned them. I remember like a couple years ago, they came out with a game called, I don't remember what it's
Yes.
called.
It was something something beast. I don't remember.
Yeah, yeah, I can't remember, but it was like Legend of the Beast or something like that. But I remember I always thought like Maiden, and they did come out with a comic book, but I thought it would have been awesome for like every Maiden album turned into a movie. Like that would have just been
Yeah.
so cool. And I think it would have added like, especially because they have like their own mascot and the whole nine, like it would
Mhm.
add a whole nother like income revenue and media stream for them. I
Yeah.
don't think they need more money though, but I think that would be cool. Like if you did something like that, maybe a couple videos, or you
Yeah,
could
it
do
would be
like a movie
awesome.
for each album. That'd be so cool.
I would love that. I've also been considering like doing a graphic novel for each album. I mean, the
Yeah.
possibilities are endless. So,
So the odd part was like I've had like numerous failed careers in my life. So like marketing was one of my like careers or whatever. So I always think of things from like a marketing standpoint, and there's so much stuff you can do with your music because it's so diverse, it's so artistic, and it's so like engaging. Like the story is really engaging. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Chronicler of Argyll.
yes, yeah, we met on Threads. He's really cool. We've talked a couple of times.
Yeah, I get the I did a couple videos for him and some reviews for him, and I got the same feeling from his stories, and I was like, it might be a cool collab someday. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Eventually, like when my schedule frees up and I don't have the next several albums planned out.
or law school. I mean, it's not like
Yeah,
that's like
I
a
mean, law school ends in May, but then I have to take the bar exam. So,
yeah.
yeah.
I want to take the bar. I don't want to go to law school, but I want to take the bar just to see how I do.
I think there are states that allow you to do that. Like you can take what's called the baby bar, and then
Yeah.
then if you pass that, you can go on to take the actual bar exam.
Yeah.
Um, and the weird thing about it is that law school does not prepare you for the bar exam, or for an actual career as a lawyer, because they teach you the theory and the abstract things, but they don't teach you the practice of law. And the bar exam is disconnected from both of those, so I
Okay.
think it's pretty pointless. And
Yeah.
we need a different way to allow lawyers into the profession.
So I was reading that you're from Maryland, and I'm right up the road in Pennsylvania.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, I didn't know like what side of Maryland are you on, east or west?
Southern Maryland, so like the
Okay.
middle southern tip of it.
It's Virginia.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I don't really know if I'd consider myself from Maryland because I was a military kid and we moved around a lot, so nothing ever really felt permanent. But that's kind of, you know, where I'm at while I'm in law school.
Yeah, I was a military dude and I drove up and down the East Coast all the
Yeah,
time. I have a lot of friends in Maryland and DC, so I go down there for shows all the time. And
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just, I saw you're from Maryland and I was like, oh, that's, you never like, most of the people are from the big cities, Chicago, LA. So I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. She's from Maryland, right down the street.
Yeah, I'm not really a big city person. I don't know. I find them kind of overwhelming. I'm much happier kind of out in nature and out taking long walks and looking at birds and making friends with all the rabbits in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I was a city kid growing up, but now my wife dragged me out into the country and I love it. I never want to go
Yeah,
back. I love
yeah,
the wildlife and the birds and it's awesome.
it's so peaceful. I love it.
It is, and it's a great place for inspiration for music too, you know? So after law school, are you going to focus more on Exiled Hope? Is that your plan?
Yeah, yeah, hopefully. The plan, once I get licensed, is to work at the law firm that I'm currently working at and also
Oh,
continue doing some PR for C Squared and continue kind of doing that part time, but also do music. So I kind of have three things going on concurrently, and that they're looking like a bunch of part time things that become a full time thing by, you know, as a whole, holistically speaking.
you got a lot on your plate, young lady. Like,
I get bored doing one thing. I was never, someone who could pick one thing and stick with it for a long time. And I feel like if I stuck with one thing, I'd get bored. So right now, I kind of have this part-time job as a lawyer and, well, as a law clerk, that's going to become a part-time job as a
sure.
lawyer once I graduate and at a very small firm. And I feel like that gives me adequate space to, have a stable career, but also explore other interests.
Are you thinking of maybe practicing law inside the music industry?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's the goal. The firm that I work for right now is a music law firm.
Oh, that's awesome.
I work for a solo attorney. He's based out of Tampa, Florida, and so I work remotely. And he works with musicians and other music industry professionals, and so I get to see a lot of record deals, and I get to see a lot of collaboration agreements, publishing agreements, all kinds of contracts, all kinds of cease and desist letter issues, all kinds of trademark registrations. So
Sure.
yeah, it's all intellectual property and music related. So the goal is to kind of have the law career feed the music career, and the music career feed the PR career, and everything kind of goes around a loop in a circle.
You got it all together planned, I tell you what. Not too many.
It took a lot to get here, but I'm really happy with how this is panning out, and I hope it continues to stay that way. And I hope I pass the bar the first time so that I don't need to change its plan.
I'm sure your hard work and determination. You sound like somebody who just grinds it out. So I I think like, hard work goes a long way. Not too many people put it out anymore. So I really wish you the best in success because that's a lot.
Thank you. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I prepare like my own legal briefs. I work with I work for the federal government, but I'm fighting the federal government. My attorney is can't represent me fully with time wise, so I do it myself. And I've learned a lot and I know how much work it all takes. And so like I also know how much work music takes. And so
Yeah.
like kudos to you. I'm blown away and impressed by your hard work and determination. Not too many people I say that about either. So
Thanks. It means a lot. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, music is a necessity because, again, I went 3 months without playing my guitar, without doing anything music related, and I was not the same person. And so it's just something that, I mean, I don't want to call it a hobby because I do want to make a good, at least part-time income off of it eventually. So I'm not going to call it a hobby to degrade it, but I'm going to call it a hobby in the sense that it's something that, supports me in my emotional well-being and also is an integral part of my other job, which is music law, because the things that I see as a law clerk at this firm I would not understand if I didn't have the background that I do in music. Because the music, I mean, any field of law is very substantive, and you kind of need to become an expert in that field if you're going to practice law in it long term. So a lot of lawyers will niche down and they'll, develop their own skill set within the practice of law, whether it's like medical malpractice or
Sure.
criminal law, anything like that. Music law is no exception. So the people who understand music law the best tend to be the ones who have like other backgrounds or have had other careers in the industry.
I think it would also help you grow too, because you're not going to have the same pitfalls that bands have with promoters or shady record deal contracts.
Yep.
Um, I'm just impressed at how much you like planned everything out to tie into each other. I mean, that's just impressive. And especially, I think it's great because maybe this sounds chauvinistic, and I don't mean it to sound chauvinistic, but as a young lady in a male-dominated field, I feel like I see a lot of it too with my daughters and my wife. As like, if you go into a car dealer, they treat women differently, and I feel that at least you'll have some protection behind you, that you're not going to fall for these same pitfalls or
Yeah,
maybe
yeah.
not. Maybe you'll at least other people will realize that they can't pull something over on you, and maybe treat you a little bit better about it.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, other female lawyers have definitely had their issues. It's still a huge problem in the legal field, but yeah, that the idea is definitely that my legal background helps me to further my own career as an artist and helps other musicians that I'm friends with and that I want to support in their careers, because I have this very particular technical skill set that can allow me to help a whole bunch of people. And I went into this with the idea that, oh, I can support my own career, but I can also make a career out of supporting others. So
Yeah, and to back it up a little bit, like you said, you would like to make a little bit off of your music, like it's not a hobby. Well, I don't think your music sounds like a hobby either. I think it definitely sounds like a professional album. I listen to a lot of music, like a lot, and I get sent a lot of music, and your music stood out. Like it's unique, it's individual. I'm not like everybody always leaves me comments like you're kissing ass, but I like the music. I think it sounds great, and it's something you should be proud of. I think you should make money off of it. It's a
yeah,
great album.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, haven't, since I don't really have the distance from my music that other people do, I often get very self-conscious about the fact that it's a very DIY project. So I'm worried that it sounds too DIY to be professional, but I don't know. In some way, that's also part of the appeal. Like I do all this myself, and it shows it. It should show in a way.
Yeah. But
So,
sometimes that's the best. Like I grew up listening to punk rock and like thrash and punk rock. But
yeah.
like I always loved the DIY, like we recorded this in our garage sound too.
Yeah, I
Because
record everything just in my apartment.
really,
No fancy equipment, just um, a little interface right here, and I just plug everything into that. And I have a little USB keyboard that I
yeah.
plug into my computer, and off we go. It's not fancy.
I'll be honest, it sounded really well produced too. I give you credit on
Yeah,
that one.
I have a fantastic mix engineer based out of the UK. He's able to work magic with
Okay.
my little studio apartment tracks.
Sure. Well, don't say it like that because it's not little tracks. Those are big tracks. They're big, big
Yeah,
sound.
a lot.
Well, hey, I hate to cut this short. We're running out of time. I want to first apologize for the rough start,
Oh, all good.
but
No,
I want to thank you for coming on today. It's been a blast. Your music kicks ass. And I wish you a lot of success in the future.
thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Good. I'm glad you had it, or I'm glad you had some fun. Maybe we could do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Like when the album comes out or when, my next release comes out. So